Well, we expected that, didn't we? And a comprehensive win for India there. 317 runs. It means the series is 1-1. And I can look back, I think, to my close of play report on the first day and report that England was staring down the barrel then, Michael. I know it's never easy to make judgments until both sides have batted and so on, so you had a bit of a fair reflection, but it just seemed after that first day, looking at the pitch and the conditions and everything else, that England were right up against it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the pitch started to spin pretty much from ball one, but we saw in that last session on day one that it just started to take a chunk out of the surface, and Rohit Sharma played a gem of an innings. I think England will look back on that first day and realise they didn't quite get it right. They didn't bowl well enough. But you can sometimes get intimidated by a great player. Rohit Sharma, I think, was that player on that first day. Ajinkya Rahane played nicely. As soon as England got the bat in hand and we saw the ball fizzing past the outside edge, and then the odd ball just kind of skidding on, particularly from Axar Patel. It's never easy as a batting unit. But England have got to be honest. I mean, to have just one partnership, and the highest one being 38. Yeah. If that is a partnership, you're kidding yourself. There should have been more partnerships, even though the pitch was doing plenty. They've got enough skill in that dressing room to have played better, and that's where they've got to be honest with each other. It's easy just to say, "Oh, the pitch was against us." Everything against the umpires, the third umpires. Ravi Ashwin's patch was delivered for him. That is Test match cricket. The home team have it in their right to produce whatever they wish. You've then got to be honest with yourself and go, right, did we play to our maximum this week? England didn't. They weren't nowhere near what they were in the first week. Conditions were different, and it was a lot easier the first week than the second. But they've got to be honest with themselves. They can't just say, oh, these things happen on these kind of wickets. Because they'll come up against India again in the next two tests, I'm sure, on a similar kind of wicket. So it's how you improve and learn from what you've found yourself playing on. India are just more skilled, Aggers, in these conditions. When the pitch spins from pretty much ball one, they have more skilled batters at playing the spinning ball, and they have better spinners to produce the spinning ball. So it's not going to be easy in the last two games. We know from being on tour in India before, where England have got to be careful is that it's like this juggernaut suddenly arise from India. It's a big juggernaut that starts to really kind of mow you down, and you've just got to take stock. And it is possible to come back. It is possible for England to bounce back and win this series by being honest with themselves and get into Ahmedabad, and maybe the fresh start, a new hotel, new ground will help them. The pink ball certainly will give them a little bit of a boost, you would feel. But if I was England, I would be preparing to play on a similar kind of wicket.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't think it'd be as bad as this one in terms of spinning as much on day one, but surely if you're Ravi Shastri and Virat Kohli, you've seen the way England play the spinning ball, not the ball that's just spinning on day one like in the first test and day two where it was just doing a little bit. This was real spin and spit. Yeah. And they've just beaten England by 317. So why, if you're the home team, you wouldn't want to play England again on a similar kind of surface?
Yeah. I mean, I guess in a way it's inevitable that you look at the batting perspective and I look at the bowling, but we've talked about England spinners throughout this tour, haven't we, starting in Sri Lanka, and just the lack of consistency and those boundary balls that come along and the full tosses and so on, that just releases all the pressure. And that again, if England are being honest, there was just too much given away from that regard as well. There wasn't that pressure that you saw from Ashwin and Patel and co, where they just wonder, like today, where on earth are we going to score a run?
Well, I've got to be honest, they're not as good.
No.
That's the honest answer there. The Indian spinners, and Ravi Ashwin, he's a great of the game, and he's going to end up with 500 plus test match wickets, if not more. He's that good a bowler. Axar Patel on debut, he's the one that I look at actually as a debutant, and it was his pace that was better than the England spinner's pace. He kind of fired it in, and those balls back to the right-handers that aren't spinning and it's just kind of skidding on, they're a nightmare to face. And then you see the next ball, it spits past the outside edge. Almost impossible to play that kind of left-arm spinner. So, it's Axar Patel that I would be looking at if I'm a Jack Leach and going, what did he do differently on this pitch? Jack was kind of nice. He was kind of rolling it out. It was lovely, a bit of flight. Whereas Axar Patel was like, boom, firing it in like Jadeja does on these kind of wickets. So again, that's... I mean, Tuffers is probably the man to ask about that. Can you change the way that you bowl for a given service? Can Jack Leach all of a sudden in a week's time in Ahmedabad, if the pitch is doing something, can he come a bit more round arm and fire it in with a bit more side spin? Because then the ball might just skid on to the right-handers every now and again, and also spit past the outside edge when you get it right. because Axel Patel, as the left-arm spinners go, I was watching Jack Leach and think, oh, he's nice, he's bowling nicely, but you wouldn't be fearful of facing him. You might have the odd ball that goes past the outside edge, but I think the real great spinners in these conditions trouble both sides of the bat. They trouble the inside edge because they do get that ball to go straight, and then they obviously trouble the outside edge, and that's what Axel Patel did in this Test match.
Yeah. What's the answer then? Tuffers, who's listening in? I thought Leach did try bowl a little bit quicker in that second innings, do you? But what's your thinking?
Yeah, I mean, you can do it. It is quite difficult to do that. You've got to put a lot more energy on it. You've got to slightly change your action and your follow through and just sort of pivot and everything. But you can bowl a little bit quicker. But you kind of just try and up your energy more than up your sort of action or change your action. You just realise that is the pace that you've got to do. But you do have that sort of natural stock pace and natural stock delivery, which, as Mike was saying, is slightly different to Axel Patel's. It's slightly more up from the hand. You can just sort of lower your arm a little bit and bowl a little bit more slingy, which gets it down there. But I mean, it's quite a difficult skill just to turn on and off. But I mean, that Axel Patel bowled very well for me, and those ones that they just slide on. I think that's what the England spinners can think about a little bit more, is actually them bowling a few straighter deliveries, a few more arm balls, just to sort of like put that into the mix, make the batsman think a little bit more.
More from Tuffers in a little bit as we round things up here. England having been bowled out for 164, so a series levelling victory for India by 317 runs, and off they all go to Ahmedabad. First of all, I was looking at the replay in front of me here. Rory Burns' dismissal, actually. I mean, it's dismissals like that England have simply got to rule out of their game. There's a little bit of a flick across the spin, foot nowhere near the pitch of it, not in control. He walked off shaking his head, but maybe he was shaking his head at the shot that he played. I think he was shaking his head at the pitch, actually, but it's contributing to your own downfall as well in these circumstances that they've got to really look at, Michael. Yeah,
and that's why I say they've got to be honest that you can say, the pitch was a poor one for Test match cricket, and there's many arguments that should suggest that it is, but it's still a pitch that the Indians got runs on. Yeah. And Ashwin got 100 on it, so clearly you can get runs on this kind of surface. It's not easy. It takes a huge amount of skill, a huge amount of planning and the way that you're going to play, and playing across the spin when it's spitting like it was is a high risk shot, and that's what Rory Burns plays. He's under pressure, I guess. He's had a real poor run of form over the last few Test matches that he's played. He missed the 2 in Sri Lanka. Started okay in the first test here with that 33, and then played a poor shot, and then he's gone 0 and 20 odd. So as an opening batsman, you know that you're under a bit of pressure. You've got Zach Crawley coming back, Johnny Bairstow's arriving. Do we know if Moeen Ali's now going home? That was the plan, that Moeen Ali was going to go home after this Test match, which I find absolutely staggering. Yes. When you're just back into the Test team, you get all these wickets, you just smashed a few into the stands, and England potentially would be sending him home. I just don't understand this scientific approach to selection. How they're not being flexible to keep players there that have suddenly done something. I just don't quite understand why a series like India away, which is such a huge series in the Test calendar, you would be swapping and changing your side so much. I don't quite get that. But
I think that argument is becoming stronger now as well, isn't it? I think people are sort of thinking, hang on a minute, this, for all the bubble life and everything else, really to be changing, but to make such sort of early calls about when players are going to be going home.
This year for me is about winning the Ashes. I know there's a T20 World Cup, but for English cricket, they need to get those Ashes back. And surely the Test team takes preference over the T20 team. And if it is that 3 or 4 of them miss that T20 5 games in India, they'll be playing in the IPL, so they're going to get experience of playing in this condition. The likes of Butler and Stokes and Jofra, they know how to play T20 cricket. It's the Test team that really should be getting all their tools. They should be getting all the eggs into the basket of the Test match team to make sure that by the time they get to Australia, they're a team that has played a lot of cricket together. Up till 2019, all the preference was white ball cricket. It won the World Cup. I honestly think that this year it's about Test match cricket, and I just don't understand all this swapping and changing in a huge series like we're seeing.
Well, certainly swapping and changing, say, with the dates known so far in advance. That's what's odd. Is not giving any thought to form or to results or to anything. It's as if it's all been preordained from weeks and weeks ago. So I do agree with that. So what do England do? It's funny how sometimes you look at the way a batsman gets out, and I'm referring now to Dan Lawrence, who's when he started in Sri Lanka, you thought, wow, look at the character of this fellow. He played some interesting shots actually in the course of this innings. But you know he's under pressure, and when you see him get out, ball fired through his legs, he's in a bit of a heap, and so on. It doesn't do his prospect a huge amount of good. You think, oh, look at that, he's kind of lost it a bit. Do you think he might step away as well?
Yeah, you'd think so. I mean, Johnny Bairstow is back, having played well in Sri Lanka. He now arrives and is available for the third test. So you'd think that Johnny Bairstow would get a run at number 3. Zach Crawley is also going to be available, I believe. So they may look at Zach Crawley. They may look at Zach Crawley for Rory Burns at the top of the order. Yeah. We'll have to wait and see. There's options. I mean, Ollie Pope, he's at number 6 now, and he needs some runs. Yeah. He keeps playing nicely. He's busy, but I was surprised that Ollie Pope didn't get moved to number 3. He's talked about as being this next best, if you like. The word on the England street is that he could be the next Joe Root. If he's that good, and that's the message from inside the England camp, if he's that good, why is he always hidden at number 6? Why can't he, in these conditions in particular, where you want to get in as soon as you can? It's the best time to bat is in that top 3 or 4. Now, why wouldn't they have seen him as a number 3 in this series and leave Dan Lawrence down at number 6? The problem that England have, and when you play so many players and you swap and change so much, you almost get more headaches because you get more players to discuss. And you get a bit confused about who should be playing and who shouldn't. You end up swapping and changing so much that it gets a bit like the 90s. Remember in the 90s when they used to swap and change the team all the time? Different circumstances, but I believe the best test teams in the world are a team that you basically arrive, Aggers, and you go, you know pretty much 9 or 10 players every week. You just know that they're going to be there. And there might be one change because it might be a tactical manoeuvre or obviously an injury. I think if you look at the swapping and changing of places in this England side, it's just going a little bit too frantic. It's a bit too scientific for me. Pick your best players for the best series and just stick with them. Yeah. Don't go 1-0 up and then change everything. Last
one from you, Michael. Just looking at, we haven't seen the pitch at Ahmedabad. But a day-nighter, pink ball, does that immediately make you think, oh, Jimmy Anderson and Stuart Broad, and it's going to be fizzing around all over the place on a dewy evening over there in Gujarat, or do you just think it's going to be spin, spin, spin? Well,
I'd be amazed if it doesn't spin. And it'll probably do a little bit more than we've seen in the first 2 Test matches for the seamers. Ollie Stone was the standout seamer for England this week. So does he play next week? Do you play Broad and Anderson? Jofra Archer obviously will be fit. You'd want a bit of Jofra Archer. Mark Wood's back into the camp as well. So they've got lots of decisions. I think 20 wickets is going to be difficult. As we've always said overseas, England have got to find a way of getting the best attack for those conditions next week. They've got to assess them and read them and pick the best team for that kind of pitch. But it will come down to runs. Can this batting unit pick themselves up to get themselves into the state of mind and the confidence to face the spinning ball to get 300, 350 in the first innings, 400? Because this week they've been a long way short of I don't think par was 350 on this kind of wicket, but it certainly wasn't the 130 in the first innings. The second innings, that's the kind of score I expected England to get. I didn't think they would get many more in the second innings, but in the first innings they should really have got 250. They didn't bat well enough. They've just been outskilled, and that's the real worry for the last 2 games, that the pitches are similar. This Indian side have just got more skill for these conditions, so England will have to play out of their skins to get something out of this Test series.
Yeah. Michael, thanks so much. We'll talk to you next week when they'll move on to Ahmedabad as well. Thanks for your company. Phil Tufnell's still there. We'll have Alistair Cook with us as well, I think, during the course of this. Tuffers, I suppose pick up where we were with Michael, really, in that the challenge is for England spinners to do better and to in a week to try and put into practice what they've learnt from this experience. And Yeah, we don't know yet about Moeen, whether he is going home or not, having had this one Test match, and whether Best comes back. I mean, it is all a bit confusing. This preordained rotation, isn't it? I mean, you wonder whether Moeen want to go back. But he's got wickets. He's hit a few sixes there, and does he want to go home?
No, I mean, you hit the nail on the head there. I was listening to you and Varney talking about it, and it's form and confidence. What's the point of, James Anderson bowled beautifully in that first innings, didn't he? I know James Anderson's slightly different kettle of fish. He's getting slightly older and what have you, but you wouldn't drop a batsman who's just gone out there and got 100, would you? Because he's in form, he's seeing it well, he's sort of got on top of the opposition, and then all of a sudden he finds himself out the side. I mean, form and confidence, especially in India, counts for so much. Just the feeling that you kind of mastering the conditions, and you're putting things that you've learned from one Test match into the next Test match. Well, if you haven't got the opportunity to do that, if you know what I mean, you're sort of like then sidelined. So I think that is a bit strange. Regarding the spin bowlers, they didn't bowl well enough in that first innings. You've got to bowl tighter. You've got to bowl more consistently. Sometimes you've got to perhaps sit back, but they just scored too quickly for me, especially Rohit Sharma. I think he was on, he was in that first session, I think he was on about 60 or 70 then. Too many release balls, too many bad balls. The Indian spinners, I mean, we were talking about the sweep shot. The sweep shot is almost a shot that you play in a bit of desperation to try and rotate strike, unless you're a very good player of it, like a Joe Root, and that's why then the mistakes can come. If you're given every shot that you want to score against the England spinners, it was a little bit too easy, and that's the difference. With the Indian spinners, you've almost got to take a risk to score runs and rotate the strike somehow, because they're putting it in that danger area, ball after ball after ball.
It's an accuracy, isn't it? The Indian batsmen know they are going to get a bad ball. If they just sit and wait for a little while, they'll get a ball to hit.
Yeah, so they don't have to take a risky shot against a ball that is a good ball. They just sort of sit there, trust their defence, knock it about with the ones and twos, and there comes the boundary release shot. So England's spin bowlers have got to really work on that, and that can be helped as well with fields, but at the end of the day, you've got to put it in the right areas. And I'm not just saying 4 out of 6, Aggers, in India. You've got to plop it in there 6 out of 6.
Yeah. Let's see what Andy Zaltzman's got to offer, shall we? Because he's down there in the shed. Andy.
Well, Aggers, England's match total of 298 for 20 wickets. The first time they've been bowled out in both innings for a total of under 300 in a Test since 1995. West Indies at Edgbaston were the opponents on that occasion. England have played 317 Tests since then. Without a match aggregate below 300. It's the first time away from home since a disastrous Test in Christchurch.
So Edgbaston game, the one where the ball went straight over Mike Atherton's head in the first over.
Yes, I remember it. I remember watching it on the telly.
Yes.
England I think made 140 odd and 89 in that game. They were bowled out for under 100 in both innings by New Zealand in Christchurch in February 1984. That's the last time this happened to England away from home. They played 201 away Tests since then, and it's their first time they've been bowled out for under 300 in both innings combined against India since the Mumbai Test, November 1981, which is the first Test of a 6-Test series, and the remaining 5 were all drawn as cricket gradually lost the will to live. On the subject of the pitch, the runs per wicket in this game, 22.8. It's the 7th time in the last 28 Tests played in India since 2016 that the runs per wicket has been below 25, so a quarter of Tests. In England, that figure is 9 out of 33, so just fractionally over a quarter. So a similar number of Tests in both India and England have been dominated to a similar extent by the bowlers. So again, we've talked a lot about whether it's spun too much, whether it seems too much in England. It's quite interesting that those figures are pretty similar over the last 5 years. Axar Patel, here's a nice one, Aggers. He's the 9th Indian to take a 5-wicket haul on debut, but he's only the 2nd left-arm spinner to take a 5-foot on debut against England since 1896. Right. And a couple of South Africans did it in the 19th century. Albert Rosinus and George Rowe, who I will admit were both new to me. Alf Valentine for West Indies did so in 1950. And Axar Patel is the first left-arm spinner on debut to take a 5-foot against England since then. And a quick word on Ravichandran Ashwin. Did not get the 10-wicket haul that would have made him just the 4th player to make a century and take 10 wickets. But he has now scored 5 Test hundreds and has 7 10-wicket matches. And there's only one other player who has 500s and 5 or more 10-wicket matches. That's Imran Khan, who had 6 of both. So an illustration of what a valuable all-round cricketer Ashwin has been. But his batting form had, as we were talking about, declined significantly. It was 55 innings since he last made 75. I was trying to dig around, trying to find my stat now. I've got too many stats in my document. It was one of the longest runs of any batsman without scoring a 50 that has been ended with a century. Yasir Shah hadn't scored a 50 in 55 innings when he made 100 against Australia. Wasim Akram had a 49 innings 50-less run, which he broke with a 257 against Zimbabwe. Saqlain Mushtaq 39, Ray Illingworth 38, and then Ashwin is 5th on that list. 35 innings since his last 50 and made 100 in this game. So it's an India-dominated stats match.
Well, yeah, absolutely, and that's reflected by the checks that have been going past. Look at the presentations here. I'm still not sure who the man of the match is. There have been so many presentations of various moments of the matches and so on. I haven't yet seen who the man of the match is. Is it Rohit Sharma for that match-winning first innings 161, or is it Ashwin's century in the second that really took the game well away from England? I mean, he's had a magnificent match, whichever one it happened to be. But he's being interviewed at the moment, and it was a brilliant 100. I don't know how it's all totally different innings, weren't they? Tough as those two. Sharma's setting it up. I mean, to score 161 on that difficult pitch.
Yeah, I'd probably give it to Sharma. I think, because the game was done. I mean, when Ravi Ashwin came in, I mean, it was a fantastic innings for sure. And I think they have given it to Ashwin, haven't they? Is that Ashwin? I'm not sure. I mean, that set up the game, didn't it? It kind of got... I think it was a very interesting point Cookie said, actually, that England, I think, panicked a bit in that first innings. It was doing a bit, wasn't it? The odd one was spitting and turning. But I think England took that sort of worry into that first innings and sort of like went, oh, wow, we've seen, Rohit get this fantastic score and what have you. But we've also seen the ball go fizzing past the outside edge. They should have just sort of like tried to get partnerships. As Varney said there, the highest partnership, 40-odd. I mean, that is just not good enough. First innings in India, so crucial with the ball and with the bat. You've got to stay in the game, and I'm afraid they were blown away in that first innings. And
he's got some updated World Test Championship numbers, I think.
Yes, the ICC have just put up a tweet for what this result means for the World Test Championship qualification. We know New Zealand have already made it to the final. England will need to win the last 2 tests for a 3-1 series victory to qualify. India, if they win the series 2-1 or 3-1, will qualify. And if it's a drawn series or England win one of the last 2 matches and the other is drawn, Australia will qualify. So it's looking a long shot for England now, but still possible. We've often seen, I think we talk a lot about momentum. I think it's often shown to be overrated as a commodity in a test series. We do see wild fluctuations between of teams recovering quickly after a heavy defeat. We saw that with India both in 2018 in England after they got humiliated at Lord's. They won the next test, and obviously India in Australia as well. And Australia, after that harrowing defeat at Headingley, managed to bounce back and win the next test. So I think I'm not sure we can necessarily throw forward to a pitch that obviously we don't yet know anything about in Ahmedabad.
No. Alistair Cook is joining us as well. Thanks for coming in, Cookie, today for a shortened appearance at the crease, as it were. We're sort of going through all as you do through the permutations and sort of picking through the debris of a heavy defeat as one is bound to do. I just wonder if you were dealing with all the media now as England captain and going back and on the bus back to the hotel, packing your bags and moving on, what would be going through your mind? Because there is quite a break. It's next Wednesday the test match starts.
Well, I'll definitely try and get the whole team together tonight not that you can do much in a bubble, but you can get them in the team room. I'm pretty sure you're allowed to do that. And just have a relaxing night, really. There's not much you can do or say. I think for the inexperienced players, you would be trying to make sure that they don't lose too much heart, too much, they don't carry the baggage from this game in terms of the mental scarring about playing Ashwin and Patel on spinning wickets into Ahmedabad, because, I think the fact that it's a day-night test match, the fact that, there's so many unknowns in going to next week actually helps England, because the conditions will be so different, will be so alien, but not just for England but for India as well. If you're say playing, if you're staying in Chennai for the next Test match, say this was Test match number 1 and not Test match number 2, that will be very hard. You're staying in the same hotel, you're playing at the same ground. Yeah. Quickly the pitch will be very similar. You'd say if India could choose it, if you're to say at the same ground. So the fact they're moving now, they've been in Chennai for ages. It's a bit of a fresh start, and it's now a 2-match series. That's what you'd have to look at it, and you just have to park it. I mean, it was pretty much done after the first day and a half of this Test match, wasn't it? So it's not as if they haven't been able to prepare for it.
It's interesting, and thanks to Tim for whispering this into my headphones, but the last day-night Test match in India, all 20 wickets were taken by seam bowlers. I'm not sure where that was staged, but
it was against Bangladesh, wasn't it?
So it was in Kolkata. So I mean, whether.
Well, I mean, I've just been speaking to someone about, obviously England have been outspun the way they played and the way they bowled it, but. If they do produce a turning wicket and then the dew comes down, and it might make it easier to play the spin because the ball might skid on a bit. You sometimes see that in day-night cricket in the one-day form, that it skids on and people choose to chase because spinners can't hold the ball. It's a lot harder to hold the ball. So that might play into England's advantage as well. So, and if the wickets do turn, if they do go back to seam, I'm not saying India have got weak seams at all. That's the difference in this England side to Indian side compared to so many in the past. They're not over-reliant on their spinners. They've got a very all-round attack. But it does bring the likes of Stuart Broad, James Anderson, Mark Wood's coming back, Jofra, hopefully if he's fit in terms of selection, Ollie Stone. It brings them back into the game. So England won't be disheartened by going for a day-night test match.
What do you make of Michael Vaughan saying? And I must admit, sitting now from this distance, I do tend to agree with him that this sort of preordained, preset in stone, the players going at certain points, it just doesn't look very flexible. And when we talked about Butler, of course, after the last Test match, Moeen after this one.
Is Moeen definitely going?
If that happens, well, I've not heard it definitely, but it's what Michael was airing. Do you think perhaps it is a bit too rigid, and that a player could get a tap on the shoulder and say, look, you're not playing this game, so you're going to go home? Yeah. Might have been a more flexible approach to actually sort of setting it out so far in advance. Johnny Bairstow going back after Sri Lanka, where he played so well. He's had a bit of a torrid journey back. I think he flew to Bangalore, then had something like 10 hours on a bus to get from Bangalore to Chennai to go back into his 6 days quarantine again.
It's so hard, isn't it? Because you try and give players communication, you try and give them planning, not just for themselves but for their families. Joss Butler's wife at home with the children, all that kind of stuff. They're trying to do it so everyone knows where they stand. They're trying to take the emotive decision out of it. You're saying to Joss Butler last week, we thought about taking you home now, and he's kind of got that in his mind. Everyone at home's got that. We're just taking Joss as an example because he went home. Everyone at home, his family, his mum and dad, his wife, his children, he's coming home on the whatever date it was, and then suddenly for that to change because England have won a game, that causes a lot of friction on a different side. So that's why England have done it. On a purely cricketing thing, from a pure England winning this series, it didn't make too much sense in my eyes. They're going 1-0 up in India is, not unheard of, but it's a great position to be in. And just by changing the dynamic, whether that had any impact on this game, I actually don't think it would have done. I think, if there's the conditions to suit India, and they got the right side of the toss, although I don't think actually the toss would have changed the effect of this game. Whether it had any impact of that, I don't know. But it's changing the winning side by 4 games. Even James Anderson not playing. How well he bowled, and he didn't bowl a huge amount of times. He might have kept carrying niggle, which they've kept quiet, all that kind of stuff. Being inside the fence when you're in the England team, all the stuff about, and then you hear, Michael Vaughan say this, and Jonathan Agnew say that. You think, oh God, they just don't know. They don't know what's going on. Do you know what I mean? So
sure.
It's very hard to suddenly sit here. But
We're trying to second guess.
Yeah, we are trying to second guess, and I think it just seemed then, what an opportunity it was, and if England with their that squad of that team, which has just had one against India, then to be broken up by 4 players is a big change.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, it does strike me as a little bit strange. As you say, you get into a rhythm. You're all together as a team. You've won the first Test match. You're sort of like, the form's there. The sort of the atmosphere is one that everyone's together and everything like that. And then everyone just starts disbanding. I mean, usually when that kind of happens on tour, I've been on, when there are different personnels coming, it's usually through injury or something like that. And you just see that there's a little bit of a shift in dynamic. People have got to sort of, get to know each other a bit more, so to speak. So yeah, no, I find it a little bit strange that they've gone down that route. But as you say, as Cookie said, we don't quite know what's going on behind the scenes. But one of the oldest adages is you never change a winning side, and 4 changes is a lot.
Yeah, and there were people, sorry to interrupt, but Cookie, there were banner people saying, well, look, if they want to go back into a bubble for the IPL, that's their business.
Well, that is a really, really good point, Angus. It's like, as a person who, obviously the IPL was never an issue for me, for them to, I know it's the modern way, and I know you've got to give the players opportunities, and I think England have been really fair actually over the last couple of years of giving these players opportunities to. But the big series, aren't there? There are big series. An India away is a big Test match series, and India one day is after it doesn't have the same impact, in my opinion. That would have been the one which I would have given them a bit of a break to. They've seen it differently, saying that build up and that one day series and the T20s are so important to the World Cup, which I agree with, but it just seems that they could have rested them for the one days, come back for the T20, and then allowed them to go to the IPL. Would have given them more sense, even if you'd have played a weaker one day side. But we haven't got a World Cup going into, for our 50 over World Cup for a while. So that's how I would have seen it, and I would have tried to keep them here for at least the first 3 Test matches, and then played a different call if the series is dead by Test match 3.
Tough as you're.
And also, I mean, I know things have hugely changed since my day, so to speak. But you sort of you play the game that you're selected in almost then to sort of get another go the next Test match. Do you know what I mean? You're not just sort of going, oh well, I'm just going to sort of play this and then we're done. So yeah, no, it makes me think a little bit. But they've done it pretty well so far, so they're going to stick with it.
Just quickly on it, I think when things go well, everything that's good in it, they knew as soon as England lost a game is what people will pick up on it. So they have to accept that this is going to be the collateral damage, the noise, the white noise, whatever you want to call it, that they will pick up for doing the decisions they've made.
Yeah. Andy, before we say goodbye to you, just mop up stat-wise.
Well, on Stuart Broad's relative lack of involvement, bowled just 20 overs without a wicket. In this Test since he last went wicketless, which is in Mount Maunganui in New Zealand last year. But coming into this Test, he'd been averaging just under 16 with the ball, so a rare barren match for him. It's the 6th fewest overs he's ever bowled in a Test match, and the 2nd fewest since August 2015. And there were 5 stumpings in the match, 3 for Folkes, 2 for Rishabh Pant. That's only the 6th Test in history in which there have been 5 or more stumpings, and only the 3rd since 1952. So nice game for watching some wicket keeping, and I think from an England point of view, some of Ben Folkes' glove work will be one of the positives that we'll take away.
Definitely agree with that. Andy, thanks so much indeed. We'll catch up with you next week as well for the day-nighter in Ahmedabad that starts on Wednesday. So a kinder watching time and listening time, of course, for everybody next week with that day-nighter. It starts 9 a.m. I think our time. Cookie, in the meantime, and I guess you'll say that this will be the skill of the coaches, and it's Jonathan Trott who's got the task here. Over the next few days, then, how do you get the balance with England's batsmen of just those who have been struggling a bit? And I'm thinking, well, Burns, Sibley, Lawrence, those.
You just basically gone the whole back line of it.
Well, I'm taking Root out of it. I'm taking Stokes out of it. I think they're pretty decent balls in this. But how do you get the balance between really trying to focus on what they've got to do against the spin bowling and technique and so on, without making it sound as if you're almost sort of rebuilding their technique and making them paranoid?
Absolutely. The biggest challenge of a coach is how much to say and when to say it, and what to say. Because the last thing you want to do is you walking in there and then say, for example, next week you've got you can have, say, Ollie Pope's in that thing. Hasn't really got a score so far in these 4 games. Looked okay, he hasn't got a score, without feeling like you're putting him under pressure. So they're walking out to bat next week thinking about their technique or about previous stuff. So Jonathan Trott, he's I think a good person to be there now, because he had to grind his way through a bit of his career in terms of being through the mental challenges, the knowing how hard the game is.
But a straight talker as well, isn't he?
Yeah, he is a straight talker. But certain players will like the straight talk, like being spoken to straight, and some people don't like that, and they'll put the shutters up straight away and won't respond to it. So he's been around those players. We've done a bit of A tours, and he will, speaking alongside Chris Silverwood, that he will know what players like that direct feedback and don't like the direct feedback. And as a coach, you want to make a difference. So you got to, whatever you say to them, you've got to think it's making a difference. There's no point just speaking to a person because you think that's my job as a coach and so I've got to change his technique. That's not going to help. He's got to think, right, what can I do to make a difference? You haven't got anything to say to make a difference, then you just got to be there for the player and let the player come to you. As a coach, you've got to be there, right, what can I do here to help him? And if you haven't got anything, just be there to throw lots of balls and let the player drive it. And I think if I was there, I'd be I would be relying a lot on Joe Root here. And this is the job as a captain, as a batsman, leader of the batsman as well. Would be who's someone who's in form and playing. He would be going around every one of those players and just checking in with them and just seeing what they need, what their thoughts are, and have a couple over a coffee or a beer, just a nice chat with them.
Yeah, and it does seem inevitable that they do make some changes, don't they? Or at least a couple, you'd think, after something like this. Well,
you'd say Johnny Bairstow comes back, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
He played. He didn't set the world alight in Sri Lanka, but played nicely, and I think you'd want that experience, wouldn't you? You'd want the guy who's played a lot in India in terms of the IPL. As well as Test match cricket and one-day cricket, and has been around the block quite a lot. So I think Johnny Bairstow comes back in. Interesting what they do with Zach Crawley.
Yes.
The guy they like it, the way he's played. He started his career. I think his wrist will probably, from the reports, is getting better. They said it was going to be 2 Test matches, wasn't it? So does he come in? So there's a lot of things for England to talk about. To think about where you said a week ago there wasn't a huge amount. So that is a challenge, and again, I've been kind of rambling on a little bit, but a week ago everything was perfect. A week later everything's not perfect. You've got to be careful, haven't you? You've got to be really careful, like when you're there, not to knee-jerk reaction, and probably you're not as bad as you think you are, and you're not as good as you think you are. You're always somewhere in that middle, aren't you?
Very sensible words, thank you, Cookie. Let's go off to Pune and welcome Prakash Wakanka. Morning, Prakash.
Hi there, everyone.
Celebrations in full swing.
Well, I don't think anyone's going to go over the top, because I think everybody realizes this was a game that I think the result was fairly obvious a few days ago, if not more. What is important now is to look forward to Ahmedabad and see how that pans out, because it's an unknown quantity. It's a new stadium. We don't know what the aerodynamics of that will be. It's a pink ball test, day-night. And England certainly have all the stuff they need in their arsenal. Now, what 11 they'll pick and how they'll go is what we'll all watch, won't we?
And it's a huge place, isn't it? I mean, obviously, I've never been there. 100,000 capacity or something. I mean, it sounds vast.
Yes.
I don't suppose they'll have 100,000 in for the match, but they'll have some in.
Well, I don't know how many they will, because there was a chat with Saurav Ganguly this morning, and he, in that interview, said it's fully sold out. Now, I don't know whether it means fully sold out to the capacity that's allowed or fully sold out. I mean, it'll be crazy to get 100,000 people into that stadium in the middle of this pandemic, but listen, stranger things have happened.
And just set the scene. I mean, is it actually sort of one of these vast sort of places outside the town? I mean, is it a bit of a journey out there? It stands there by itself, and it's colossal structure.
Well, I guess it's exactly the same location as the old Motera Stadium, where you've been there before, and I think so has Alistair when England toured. So it's the same venue. It's just that the entire stadium was pulled down, and this entire spanking new stadium was built. And the only event that's happened there, and I don't think there's any connection to cricket, is when Donald Trump visited India. There was a sort of a rally or an event for him in that stadium, which had 100,000 screaming people to look at the then U.S. president. So that's the only event that's actually been held there. There's been no international cricket game, obviously, and this will be the first test match played there after the new stadium has been constructed. I'm told, I haven't seen it in person, I've seen lots of pictures and videos. I'm told it is an absolute brilliant facility. How it'll play in the middle, no clue.
No, and at night,
yes,
Ahmedabad,
yes.
Obviously a bit further north, and it's west of where they've been. Conditions-wise, I mean, you expect a bit of dew and so on there in the evening?
Again, just reminding you, Agas, you'll remember early morning when we used to go for the test match to Motera, it was nippy.
Yes.
So it's February, it's late February. Seasons have been delayed a little in India this year, so I wouldn't be surprised if it's a little bit cooler in the evenings. Dew is a definite possibility, I would think, particularly if it's hot during the day. And, what the swirling wind inside, will it really be a factor or not? No one knows, because there's no cricket being played there of any significance. So lots of unknowns. And therefore, I think it makes it very, very interesting and exciting.
Yeah. One thing we do know for sure, those at India are back, aren't they? They did look off the boil in the first match, and curiously Kohli seemed rather off the boil in that first match, but he's back to how we know and love him as well, isn't he?
I don't know about the love him. I mean, there's only a love or a hate relationship with Kohli, but yes, I think he's back. India are back. What I'm particularly happy is to see Ashwin talk about how he's enjoying his cricket again, and it just shows that when you're in a great space between your ears, that reflects in everything you do. And it's good to see more smiles on the face. What I also enjoyed very much, I must say, just watching images, was the approach that I thought the England batsmen took in the second innings. I'm not suggesting they were not trying their best, but it was not as if they were being too hard on themselves, were they? I mean, there were smiles around. There was, a sort of wry grin here and there. And I think that's a great way to handle adversity when you know it's inevitable.
And a last thought from you, Prakash. You know Indian cricketing politics better than anyone. What sort of pitch do you think, having seen what's happened in Chennai on this particular type of pitch, what do you think might go on behind the scenes, if anything? Perhaps it won't, but do you think that there will be something similar to this rolled out in Ahmedabad?
Look, I can only say that Jay Shah, who is the secretary of the BCCI, this is his home ground.
Yes.
And therefore, if there is a prescription to be given, it will be what the BCCI want or what the team management want. And I think it was made fairly clear that what the team management want is turning tracks. Now, turning tracks on day one with puffs of dust by lunch or not, I don't know. I sincerely hope that it is a wicket that turns, fine, because that plays to the home team's advantage. But it takes away the criticism that typically comes with a wicket that many will argue isn't the way you want a first or second day pitch to be. I hope it's a nice, fair track. I hope it puts the skills to test, and may the best team win.
Sounds good, Prakash. Thanks much indeed for joining us. We'll talk to you next week as well. Final thoughts from Alistair and Philip. Let's go with you, Philip. Any final thoughts before we say goodbye?
Yeah, set up beautifully. I don't think England should be too harsh on themselves about this loss, and I think that they should, as you say, dust themselves off, have a look at perhaps a few little spots in the batting order and a little bit of team selection, but I don't think they should do it, go too mad on it, and just, recamp to Ahmedabad and go again. It's 1-1 with 2 to play.
Excellent. See you soon, Tuffers. Thanks very much for your company. And go on then, Cookie. We'll give the last words to you.
I'm going to say Tuffers summed it up perfectly. Looking forward to a pink ball test match in the subcontinent. I think that's going to be a great step into the unknown. I think that's what England should be excited about. Actually, bin this conditions off, as I say. It hasn't been a great week for them, but 1-1 definitely would have taken that leaving Chennai.
You're listening to the TMS podcast from BBC Radio 5 Live.
So let's hear from the England captain, Joe Root. He's been speaking to Simon Mann about the challenging pitch they've played on in Chennai.
Well, as I said after the last game, I think it's really important that we stay level. We don't get too far above our station when we win, and we don't see it as doom and gloom when we have tough weeks like we have this time round. We've played some really good cricket over the recent past in challenging conditions, very foreign conditions, and we've been, let's be honest, outplayed in all three departments this week. So it's important that we learn. We take it as a bit of an education. We look at how they've gone about things on a surface that has spun a huge amount, probably bounced more than we'd anticipate as well. But take that forward. Take it as a learning. And make sure that we're better for it next time we do experience conditions that are similar. It was a challenging wicket, and I do think that the toss was an important one to win, but it wouldn't have guaranteed us to win the game either. The fact is that India have showed that you can score runs on it, and found a way of managing a very tricky service. So for us, I think we've got to learn from that. We've got to take bits from it, add it to our own games, and come back better for it as well. They're very different to what a lot of our guys will have experienced before. But as long as we learn from it, then we'll be a better side in the future. It might not be that when we come to bat on day 2 of a game that it spins as much as it did this time round, or performs how it did this time round, but it might be days 3, 4, 5 where it becomes a little bit more challenging. And now we've got that in the bank. Hopefully guys will be able to take that forward and be better for it.
Moeen 8 for 226, Jack Leach 8 for 178. Did you actually want more from your spinners in these conditions? You described it as a challenging pitch. Did you want more from your spinners?
What I would say is that I think as a bowling group, we've spoken a lot recently about building pressure for long periods of time. I think one thing that we could have got a little bit better, especially on day 1, was just squeeze the game for longer. Try and bowl 6 balls at one batter. Try and make it difficult for them to rotate strike and create pressure that way. And I think that's one thing that we can take forward for the rest of the tour. Can we find ways of keeping the board quieter for longer? Can we string maidens together? And can we force errors through very disciplined passages of play with the ball? That's one thing I think that they did a lot better than us. And I also think that one thing our batters need to learn is that how well they manage to rotate strike, how they manage to bat at the other end on a very challenging surface. So as long as we look at the game honestly, we look at areas that we can improve on. I think they did a lot of good stuff as well in the middle of all that. So as long as we're always looking forward as a team, and we don't get too hard on ourselves after this week. You've got to remember, we won all in this series. We're very much in it, very much a part of it. We played 3 brilliant games coming into this one. So as long as we stay level, keep working hard, we're very much alive and kicking in this series.
What's happening to Mo now? Is he going home?
Yeah, Moeen's chose to go home. It's obviously been a very tricky tour for him. And as mentioned at the start, players feel like they need to get out of the bubble then. And that's been an option, and I think it's really important that we stand by that. And that decision's been made, and hopefully he feels better for it.
Just on the batting side of things, I mean, is it a case sometimes that the puzzle is too difficult to solve? I mean, you talked about how you can play, but sometimes the conditions can be too much against you.
I think one thing we've got to bear in mind, and we've got to be quite realistic about, is there is very few examples that a very young batting group will face conditions like that. So one thing that we coming here, on this tour is there's a number of guys that hadn't been to Sri Lanka before. There's a number of guys that haven't played in India before. Never mind an extremity as this wicket's provided. So we've been very good at learning quite quickly, and that's why we've had success away from home in recent times. It's important that we just take that forward again. there's not, as I said, there's not many times guys will have batted on a wicket that's bounced and spun and misbehaved as much as that. I think one thing that I take from the way that they played it was how calm they stayed, how unflustered they were when those deliveries did really misbehave, how they didn't waver from their game plans, how they knew exactly where they were going to score their runs, how they managed to bat at the other end for long periods of time. And I think they're just a few of the things that, as a batting group, we've got to look at, right, how does that look for us individually? How am I going to manage these big turning deliveries, and how am I going to stay really calm and clear under pressure?
Johnny Bairstow and Zach Crawley are back. They're available. Are they right in the frame? And I mean right in the frame for selection for the next Test match?
Yeah, I'm sure that they'll want to get some more time in practice and utilise the lead up to this next game. But we'll put a squad out there as soon as we're ready, and anyone in that squad is obviously up for selection.